Я хотів би, однак, дуже щиро поздравляти і вітати українських колегів і колежанок, які тут присутні. Дуже дякую за те, що ви тут. We're going to be talking in English because Slava always makes me talk English. I don't know why this is. He could have taught me to speak Ukrainian a long time ago, and then that would have been more soft power, which is going to be our theme tonight. Будемо говорити про так звану м'яку силу, м'яку soft power. We're going to be going back and forth. There's no moderator. So I can't guarantee that we're going to be moderate, right? We'll just say whatever it is that we say. So Slava, why don't we sit down and why don't we begin the conversation? This will just be a conversation.
Всім доброго вечора. Так. Дуже радий тут сьогодні бути. Дякую тим за запрошення. Thank you very much.
Прошу.
Let's make something. Actually, two of these most expensive seats are still not occupied, you know. So sorry, Ні, хто пізно встає, тому бовкає.
Але яке це було шанса для демократії?
So it's a very important thing that Tim just mentioned. We were thinking about soft power for many years, and we know a lot of examples of soft power in the world. Probably the most successful, which still is dominating the world, this or that extent, is so-called American soft power, which is actually a lot of things, starting from, our fashion, everyday fashion, to rock and roll, to cuisine, to whatever. So many people even argue that the Beatles, which actually are not American band, but still part of this big Western soft power, were more important in collapsing the Soviet Union than many other political events. I wouldn't dare to say that I completely agree with it, but I think this soft power certainly contributed, because people in the Soviet Union and many other authoritarian countries, they just saw a very persuasive and attractive thing that they wanted to be part of. This way of living, this soft power in music, in culture, in fashion, in everyday behavior, in other things. So I think it's very important now to continue this conversation, what Ukraine and what we Ukrainians can do, but our big diplomatic efforts, our heroic and very important military struggle in the front line, which is going to happen till the victory, I believe, but what we can do more in regarding to these terms of soft power to make the world understand us, love us if you want, like us, want to cope with us, and believe us, the most important thing. So that's my question to you, and probably to me as well.
Okay. So so Slava and I have had lots of conversations before, but we've never done it in front of a bunch of people. So this is going to be interesting because we know each other well. So Slava, when you talk about America, I want to make a point that the thing that is often the most attractive from the outside maybe arises from a place inside which not everybody notices. So you gave the example of rock and roll. Where does rock and roll come from? Rock and roll comes from African Americans moving northward during industrialization, encountering white folk music, playing for white audiences. Rock and roll comes straight out of the troubling American or the beautiful American encounter of African Americans and others. In other words, this thing which was and is so resonant comes from a deeply authentic but also complicated and difficult place in our culture. And so what I'm trying to say is that what is soft power isn't necessarily a calculation. It has to come from somewhere which is true, right? So if Ukraine is going to have soft power, it has to come from a place which is authentic. It can't just be made up. And this is a place where as soon as we start talking, so first of all, I want to say, when I was like a child, when I was a student, I edited the article that the political scientist Joseph Nye wrote, where he defined the term soft power. Like, I actually edited that. And I thought, like, okay, I thought this is really funny. Like, he's talking about blue jeans and things. But of course he was right. But the thing about soft power is, it not only does it have to come from somewhere true, you also can't overthink it, right? Like, you can't think, oh, this is the thing which is cool. This is the thing which is going to work. Like, there's a very important difference between, and this is something I want us to talk about, there's a very important difference between Russia and Ukraine in this war, right? Russian soft power has been very effective. It was very effective in 2014. It's been much less effective now. It's not that it changed, it's that Ukraine had something different to do and something different to say. So not all kinds of soft power are the same, right? The Russians take for granted that there's no truth, nobody really cares about anything. So soft power is just manipulation, right? It comes from a vacuum. But Ukrainian soft power in this war has been something different. I think precisely because it's been different, it's worked better. And like, that's something which I wouldn't want anybody to lose. I wouldn't want you to overthink soft power and think, aha, like, we just have to do like the black PR, but we have to do it better. I don't think that's where you want to go. That's where I'm going to hand it off to you.
Yeah, I totally agree. I'm with you here, and I just don't think that black PR is soft power. I just think that it's a stinking power or something like that. So it still works, but it works not because of good things, but just because it's inevitable, and you can't turn it off. It's so overwhelming and sometimes so stinking bad. So you just know about that. But some people, like professionals, evil professionals, can mask it properly. I totally agree with you, but I also want to add another thing, that in a free society, in my opinion, it's very difficult to monopolize soft power. Because when we talk about rock and roll, okay, let's say, imagine, that's certainly not true, but ironically imagine that was a creation of some worried minds in, I don't know, early CIA headquarters or whatever. Let's make rock and roll, in a kind of make it happen and make it, kind of conquering the world. But the thing is that the moment, as you say, this music became popular, in the United States, then in UK and other countries, it was very difficult to tame it, because it's something which is so natural, like a business models in a free economy. So you can't tame things. You can create them. I think that you can create them, but once you create them, as with Frankenstein, you can't tame it, because it goes whatever does it. It can do good things or bad things, but it's natural. And while it's natural, you can't predict. You can't predict the growth or the decline or the decay, whatever. You just know that it's existing, and it's also appealing to people, and it's working. And then suddenly, I think governments in the world, they used it for better or for worse, but they used it. I mean, soft power in Vietnam also was kind of working. It didn't work well, but it was helping at the beginning. Yeah, but then coming back to Russia, I think the problem with Russian soft power is that they don't have. I mean, Russia is a country where the word freedom sounds like oxymoron, So they just don't know how to create something great and then to let it live. They always need to control. They always need to impose something from the top, and also to have it central. And I think, in my opinion, the centralized ideas, especially in arts, which is part of soft power, will never work in the long term. In the short term, they can do something. In the long term, they will always lose, because the free mind, 1 million of free minds are always better than one genius, but worried mind, or a kind of ill mind or sick mind. That's my point. So I think Russia will never succeed in this way before they become a free country, and that's a different country, not the Russia we know now.
Yeah, I mean, there's something. That's what I was. In a way, you were saying what I was trying to say, Slava, which is that the soft power that you want is a soft power which comes from some kind of authentic place, right? So when we look at so Václav Havel, the Czechoslovak president, the famous dissident, he began his career as a dissident by defending rock and roll musicians. Those rock and roll musicians, the Plastic People, the Universe, some other bands, they weren't political at all on the surface. The Plastic People of the Universe were just some guys who liked to listen to the Velvet Underground. Yeah. And the Velvet Underground is not obviously political at all either, yes. Right? But you follow the chain, right? You follow the chain. The Plastic People of the Universe took their name from a guy called Frank Zappa, who sang a song called Plastic People. But it's that all of that was critique of the society they were living in. Like the soft power of rock and roll doesn't come from saying "Yay America." I mean, there are some rock and roll songs which say America is great, and those are all bad songs, right? The rock and roll comes from tension, right? It comes from rebellion. It comes from dissatisfaction, right? And so that's kind of the difference here between soft power as you're describing it and propaganda, right? So if you want to have soft power as you're describing it, then you have to support the arts. You have to support cinema. You have to support music. You have to support education for children and all of these things. Because if, as you say, it's unpredictable, you don't know which kid is going to be the genius that writes the Ukrainian novel, which then becomes the bestseller, right? And that's the thing which Ukraine has been doing. I mean, one of the differences between now and 2014 is that there are just a lot more Ukrainian artists, filmmakers, and writers, fashion designers who are known in the West than 10 years ago. And that's not just us knowing, it's Ukrainians producing.
Yeah, but may I build on that? Partly, and it's a very sad thing and maybe even, I would say, tragic thing to admit, but partly this access to the world attention of Ukrainian artists, musicians, writers, comes on the sake of these people in the military uniform sitting here. Because actually, while they are fighting there and showing these examples of heroism and making Ukraine a headline country, as it was, I remember, first months of this full-scale invasion of Russia in Ukraine, dying there and sacrificing their lives and health and very important things that they have, that's a sort of a very, very hard price, bloody price that now Ukraine pays for attention. And it makes me feel, you know, my heart is bleeding because of that, and it really breaks my heart. And I can't say that it's something you can't avoid, because we are in fight. We're fighting against enemy, and that's inevitable. That there is blood and there is front line and everything. But what part of me inside bleeds, because I understand that cynicism of the world is that now we are accepted just because we are great guys fighting the evil in a movie, like you were watching on CNN or Fox News. Oh, these are great people. Maybe we can watch also, not only know how great they are as the soldiers, but let's see, maybe they have great arts, maybe they have great, I don't know, music, great, maybe they have some great startups on that. They open Ukraine because of, you know, these heroic deeds of these people and their colleagues. And I'm proud of that, but also I need to admit that breaks my heart, because it gives you a sort of a superpower for attention, but what a price for that. Why can't we just accept each other just because we do some great stuff, and not because you need to pay that big price just to be a headline on CNN? Just last thing, I remember me last year in Kharkiv. It was March in Kharkiv. I went there many times. Probably it was the second time I went there. So these famous buildings, infamous now ruins of the center, were already there. So it happened. And I remember it was 10 a.m. in the morning, Sunday, and I got a call from CNN, not the first one, not the last one, but that was a unique one. So the host, it was 10 a.m. or 11 a.m. in Ukraine, so probably 10 a.m. in Europe, 9 a.m. in the UK. So I was on the air, and they wanted me, I was there in the buildings, to describe what's happening. And the last thing, I found myself talking to them continuously on 15 minutes in a row, 15 minutes on the air of CNN, just being a journalist, and they was, okay, what's that building, what's that? So you had an unprecedented attention. And then when I analyzed that that's because of these ruins, that's because of this evil thing that happened with the country. So it brings a lot of irony to the thing. But now, is it ironic or not, the thing is that while Ukraine is in the agenda, still there, maybe not on the headlines like a year ago, but still there, we need to use it. And not to use it with propaganda, but to use it to help to these great people, these artists, to these musicians, theaters, even those who are not doing arts but soft power in the form of innovations, I know, some startups and everything like that. We need to use this door that is still open and also help each other. And that's a great time to show unity through a good and healthy natural competition, just inside the country and certainly outside as well.
So I think it's both darker and brighter than you say. I mean, it's darker because Ukraine doesn't get attention because of suffering anymore. I mean, that moment has basically passed, and that's not the argument that's going to work.
Not anymore. Yes.
Not anymore. I mean, some, but not on the scale of 2 years ago, and that's not going to come back. And that's the sad truth, that the amount of attention you get is not proportionate to how much you suffer. That you can continue to suffer and the attention will go down. The kind of the way to get attention has to do rather with showing what you can do. Yes. And that means not just showing how you can win on the battlefield, which is a serious conversation that has to be had, but also showing how you persist as a culture, like getting beyond the moment that we're talking about of a flash of attention into a moment where Ukrainians are suddenly at home in world culture, which is happening. Ukrainians are domesticating themselves in various parts of world culture, and in a way which is permanent. So in some ways it's darker, but I think also in some ways it's brighter than what you say, because well, for one thing, courage is also a form of culture. Right? When people risk their lives, they're doing something which has to do with values, and that gets people's attention. It's not just the suffering, Slava. It's not just the dying. The thing which I think has more enduring power is the choices that people make. That's what gets people. That's when the Europeans and the Americans who are still paying attention are paying attention because of the values, because of taking risks for values. That's really significant. But I think the thing which has to happen in terms of soft culture is that soft power is the establishment of a kind of middle term, right? It's not something which is a flash in the pan. It's not some kind of, it's not some scheme. It's something which endures, something. And here's where I think things have gotten better. 10 years ago, nobody, as a first approximation, nobody during Maidan in the West had any story about Ukraine except the Russian story. So part of the problem, Slava, is that when you start with soft power, it's not a blank canvas, right? You don't get to paint whatever you want because somebody else's painting is already there, right?
Absolutely.
And you can't just wish that away, right? There was already a Russian painting on that canvas, and everybody in the West knew the Russian painting. That has changed radically, right? That's changed dramatically. The whole parameters of the discussion of Ukraine has changed, and that's also soft power. It's only half visible, but the fact that now most people in the West recognize that Ukraine is a subject, right? That most people are now kind of waiting for what the Ukrainian story is going to be. That I think is a big change, right? When I talk to European policymakers in Davos or in other places, they now just take for granted that Ukraine is real and that their Ukrainian colleagues are their equals and their friends and so on. That is new, and that is a success.
I have a just question to you. You mentioned that the paradigm, or like, let's say, the narrative of what Russia says and what Ukraine says, and the let's say the fight between that became meaningful only last years. So do you think that these efforts, like formal efforts, like changing the names, the origin of names of painters in the West museums, and also emphasizing the origin of this or that, you know, composer or writer, and regarding to their heritage, and is it important, or is it more important for you, do you think, to focus on present and future things and doing something that we start doing from scratch, or just fighting who, I don't know, who Malevich was, you know?
No, I think it's worth talking about who Malevich was, because it's like the painting, you know, okay, it's a bad analogy because Malevich was a painter, so it gets confusing, but there's already a story of who Malevich was. And you can't just let that story go, because the story's not neutral. If you let it go, it continues to educate the next generations, and then he's just a Russian artist forever. So, you know, Malevich has to be reclaimed for the Poles. Just kidding. I'm just seeing if you're paying attention. But like, there has to be a discussion about who he was and about what happened. You know, these discussions have to be had, because Ukraine, like a lot of cultures with a deep colonial history, has these figures who are complicated, and you have to scratch the surface a little bit to find out what's interesting in them. I think that's definitely worth doing. I don't think it's the only thing worth doing, though. Because, I mean, in Ukraine, you have this very rich resource of your own history. So, you know, with the Russian paradigm, the way that you beat it is not just by saying it's not true, which it isn't, but it's by producing something new, right? So we have, you know, I'm looking around. I have some colleagues here who, together with me, are starting a big project in Ukrainian history, where we're going to go all the way back to prehistory, right? Because you can start on Ukrainian soil, and you can tell the following story, which is true. 7,000 years ago, there were cities in what's now Ukraine. Roughly 4,000 years ago, those cities were destroyed by nomads from Ukraine, from what's now Ukraine, also southern Russia, to be fair. And those nomads, those pastoralists, brought Indo-European languages to Europe. So like the ancestors of the languages that we're speaking now, Ukrainian, English, lots of other languages. You can tell a story that begins way back in the ancient past. You can explain how the ancient Greeks were deeply connected to what's now Ukraine. The reason why the Greeks had legends and myths about Amazons was that the Scythians really did have female warriors, right? But that's something you only figure out if you look at Ukraine. So everything we think we understand, all these big parts of the whole Western civilization story, make more sense if you put Ukraine into them. That's the kind of thing, I mean, not everybody has to be a historian, right? I can't help it. I'm a historian. I will never be anything else, right? But you can create things. And then what you create fills in the space, right? And it has the virtue, and this is something that I keep coming back to, of being true, right? Like the historical there's this huge gap in the history of Ukraine because of Ukrainian Soviet or colonial past. Ukraine is a place where so many cross currents of global and European history were present, and we just we haven't quite written it out yet because of the Soviet and colonial past, right? And so the point is not just to say that the Soviet and colonial narrative is wrong. You have to do that sometimes. But the point is to say, oh, look, there's something which is really interesting and cool and which makes everything else look different if you start from Ukraine. So yeah, you have to claim Malevich, and you have to claim what happened, and there's a lot of claiming that has to be done. But there's also a lot of creating which has to be done.
It's very difficult to talk with Tim usually, because it's a sort of, I don't know how I can make a discussion, because, you know, I always agree with what he says, you know. Yeah, I have one claim for you as an American. It has maybe nothing to do with Russians, but there is one thing that all Americans can do a great stuff for Ukrainians. One of the best jazz musicians in the world, and my best, like number one for me, jazz pianist, Bill Evans. He has Ukrainian heritage. His mother, Irina Soroka, was from Ukraine. So let's make sure that everybody in America knows that. Yeah. Okay. So I don't know. I couldn't agree more with what you say. I just think that very important is to one part of Tim's speech is that it's a mid and maybe long range timing. We can't stop and relax and think about the future without doing something now. But also we need to learn how to play long games, and that's something I urge all Ukrainians, especially leaders who are sitting here. It's not only about what is going to be tonight in 10 o'clock. It's also what about to be tomorrow morning, figuratively, day after tomorrow, and in a month, in a year, and so on, so on, so on. And we all can change it. Ironically, we can see what we change today. We want to see the change tomorrow, and we think it's easier to see the impact which we do tomorrow, but it's the opposite. What we do now, the impact that we can see will be in years. So you don't see the result today, but you know that you need to do that. You need to create these arts. You need to write these books. You need to make these discussions. You need to change the names for the right names in museums. You need to write new books. And you don't expect that soft power, the bad thing of soft power, it doesn't work immediately. So you need time. You need little by little by little by little. And then probably by the time that the world will be ready, we need to be ready to give the whole thing. So here is 1, 2, 3, 4, and you've been through this for many, many years. So in my opinion, something that we probably lack a little bit now in Ukraine. So we are focused, which is also understood, on very short-term results. We need to have wins tomorrow or today. And it's understood because, like in military situation, you can't wait because every day of waiting, you lose. But with the soft power, I think, and maybe you argue with me, it's a little bit different. You work every day, hard, 24/7, but you don't expect, okay, in 1 year we need to have a Nobel laureate. In 1 year you need to have a Grammy winner. In 1 year, if we don't do, we fail, we suck. No, it's a long thing. And I think we are on the way. We kind of, the things that Ukrainian arts and generally soft power had done during last 2 years, I think it's enormous. Maybe it's still not that visible for average observer, but I think it's enormous already. The most important thing is to encourage others people to continue doing that and not to expect a quick win tomorrow. Just keep doing things like Ivan Franko said, keep kind of lupайтесь у скалу. That's I don't need you don't need to translate it.
Yeah.
By the way, he was a great soft power guy.
Let me pick up on Franko though, because Franko helps me with something that I was trying to formulate earlier and maybe I didn't. Like soft power often comes out of the intersections inside a culture. So when we talk about reclaiming things for Ukraine, sometimes it's a little bit too much like, well, he was, an ethnic Ukrainian. Okay. I mean, there are a lot of ethnic Ukrainians out there who the world needs to know about, for sure. But very often the things which people find interesting are the things that are kind of at an intersection, like rock and roll music. I mean, rock and roll music was basically made by immigrants, by people, like the Velvet, since I'm already on them, the Velvet Underground, is a son of an immigrant, the lead singer. And so it's like, it's the tension sometimes. And so when you think of Ukrainian soft power, I think it's very important to think of the Crimean Tatars. I think it's very important to think of the Jews. I think it's very important to think of the interstices, like the places. They
have even not soft power, like hard power in the country already.
Yeah. Well, that's right. But that you have to look at that because often it's there in that connection which you find something which can really go international, right? That sometimes happens. And then the other thing I wanted to say, now I'm going to be more ethnic Ukrainian. So in this whole move, not to use Russian anymore. Which I completely understand, that I'm certainly not going to argue with you about it. But in these discussions, what I want to hear more of is like, I want to hear like how beautiful the Ukrainian language is, right? Like so when in the discussions, like I can't use Russian anymore because of this, but how about like, I want to use Ukrainian because it's such a beautiful expressive language. I think there could be more of that in this conversation, right? You have to like affirm and love your own culture before it becomes soft power. And so like the language, like it's not just a negative thing. We're not going to use Russian for this or that reason. We're going to use Ukrainian because it's so beautiful. We're going to use Ukrainian because you can do things in Ukrainian you can't do in other languages, which is completely true, right? Which is completely true. So that's just a word of encouragement.
It's the most beautiful language in the world for me. So
there we go. Дуже гарний приклад.
Yeah, interesting that I know Tim's family for quite a few years, and Marcy, his wonderful wife, and Tim were so supportive to Ukraine even before it became a fashion. And I hope this fashion will last for a long, long time, eternally. But I mean, you were like early adopters of these idea through world American English-speaking intellectual world that Ukraine is a very important subject. It's certainly not an object by any means. It's just a subject which should be emphasized and learned and supported and everything. How did you come to this? I mean, for me, it's interesting because I know you for you're writing books, like a lot of books, but two of your books, like Bloodlands and The Black Earth, have made a great impact through intellectual society in the world. Then sadly on Tyranny, which is not about Ukraine, but it has connection. And sadly now these new lectures that everybody, including my family, is like, studying, and others. So how do you come to that? Why do you think what was personally important for you and then for Marcy?
I mean, I would want Marcy to speak for herself because I think we're pretty different about this. But for me, I have the luxury of not being Ukrainian, and so whenever I find something about Ukrainian history which is really interesting, I just get to be all enthusiastic about it, and nobody ever says, "Well, you only think that because you're Ukrainian," right? Or almost nobody, right? Like some people think I am Ukrainian, but I'm not. So for me, it's really easy, Slava, because what I've found is that for East European history, for me in general, was a way of unlocking European and world history. Like the themes, like the big themes in world history, European history, you only really understand when you look out from Eastern Europe. And what I'm saying about Eastern Europe is more true of Ukraine than any other part of Eastern Europe. All the big themes, not just in modern history, but going back, as I said before, thousands of years, if you start from Ukraine, you end up making a lot more sense than if you start from other places. And so I just have the luxury that I can go in and try to fill in these big stories using Ukrainian examples with the help of the work that Ukrainian colleagues have done before me. It's really that simple. So, for me, it's a big luxury because I just get to tell the truth the whole time, right? Like I don't think about it. I'm a historian. I find these things interesting. It's the explanation of the Holocaust or the explanation of Holodomor or whatever that I give. It's my example. It's my argument. But you can't possibly make the argument without knowing something about Ukraine. And it turns out that Ukraine is just instrumental for understanding so many other parts of the world. So it's really very easy for me, and and of course I should say, like there were all the patient Ukrainians who tried to teach me the language, right? And then there are the great Ukrainian, like the Ukrainian novelists, like Zhadan, like the people who I like to read in Ukrainian, like that helps too. And they're all my Ukrainian friends. Like you mentioned On Tyranny. I mean, I wrote On Tyranny. On Tyranny is about America, but I wrote it as an East Europeanist, and a lot of the examples actually came from Ukraine. So Vasil Cherepanin is not the first person to say corporeal politics, but one of my lessons in On Tyranny is about corporeal politics, that is like going out, protesting, and so on. And that was in my head because of Maidan, and that expression I took from Vasil. So like Ukraine was actually involved even in that book.
Yeah, thank you for that from all Ukrainians, and I wish more people like you existed, and I know that they do exist. We know a lot of them. Some of professors and scholars and intellectuals in the West, including Yale University and Stanford and other places I had the luxury to be at, there are like sort of places of I don't know, of support of Ukraine within the academia, and I always find these people. For me, what makes difference is just sometimes they're a little bit more curious or a little bit more inquisitive in trying to find the truth, because most intellectuals who start learning Ukrainian case and who suddenly don't have a, let's say, are not motivated by, unfortunately some of them are literally motivated by Russian soft power, which is money or some other things. Those who are not, usually just using some, like, knowledge and some time and investing and putting some efforts, they always come to the case that Ukraine deserves its place under the sun, the case the Ukrainians are trying to yell about to the world. And my question is probably not only to you, but to everybody, to me, to everybody, how can we make easier for other people like yourself to follow these paths and just to discover Ukraine for themselves and then to adopt it to the world further?
The funny thing about this conversation was at the beginning, Slava said, "Okay, Tim, I want you to ask me a bunch of questions." And I was like,
yeah, I know.
I was like,
I know,
okay,
Tim,
I'll ask you a bunch of questions.
You don't ask me questions, so
no,
that's why I'm filling the gap.
yeah. But you're.
I mean, I'm really interested.
But I can't. I keep trying to ask you questions, and it's not happening. This one thing which is really important that the Ukrainian government, I think, needs to think creatively about too, is getting more people physically into Ukraine. Because for me, like, I've been doing this for a long time now, and for me, the thing which best predicts whether somebody understands Ukraine and is sympathetic is whether they have been physically on the territory of Ukraine. I mean, not their politics, not their gender, not their age, but like, have they actually been physically in Ukraine? Like, I have a lot of friends who are of like very different convictions from me, but the thing we have in common is that they've been to Ukraine, and we have, like, that's the thing that overlaps, right? And so I realize there's a war on, and I realize that we're difficult, but getting people into Ukraine, into Kiev, start with Kiev or start with Lviv, that's easier, but getting more people from the West and from the so-called global South physically into Ukraine is, I think, the best way to start. That's the thing which is indispensable, because a lot of this, like, you're not going to win just on the basis of mass communications. The personal element is where you win, but the personal element has been weakened by the war. So that for me, that would be number one.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because I actually have a lot of examples, including one of the most striking examples. I have a friend with whom we just befriended. We know each other many years ago, but the war made us real friends. A famous British English musician, electronic and cult musician, Robert Lenaya from Massive Attack, and he came to Ukraine, and I remember we talked like 3 or 4 days after he came from Ukraine. We met in London. I happened to be in London the day, and he told me that it was a game changer for him. It's not that he supported Ukraine from the very beginning. He called me the first day, but when he saw personally all the atrocities, but also people, he got to meet people. I mean, just people in Lviv and Kiev. He was in many places, not only Lviv, or he was in some unsafe places too. And he said it was a game changer, and I remember we immediately decided to make this project. So he made his wonderful remix for Obime, and other things, and we have plans more and more. And he's now one of the biggest keen supporters in. Not only he's vocal, he's not just telling his friends things. He's posting things. He's trying to participate. He's trying to help, and he's an iconic figure. And if we have people like him and other people coming and being in a good way, I don't know, not to sign it, I don't want to sound like too cheesy, but to get converted, in a good way of that. So it's very important. So I'm trying to do my best, but I also think that everybody, including all of you, famous or influential or just people who have more potential for change in different countries. Just go ahead, get into Ukraine, find the way, encourage them, give them some incentive, give them something that they will be encouraged and inspired to go to Ukraine, and then to help them to understand the country inside.
Yeah, I want to say that, like, speaking of soft power, I've started to change my own tastes in music, like in terms of who supports Ukraine or not. So, like, without mentioning any names, like, there are bands that my kids like, and they support Ukraine, and so now I like them too. Okay, that was a bit of an inside joke, but like, but it's a serious point, because for me, like, to be in culture means that you should be making judgments sometimes about values, and I just wish there were more people in the big world of American culture who made a choice about this particular issue, and I think more people will. But I want to echo Slava's point. People, like, soft power of the kind we're talking about works through people. I have a colleague at Yale called Jason Stanley, who's a very left-wing philosopher, who went to Kiev and taught a class, and now is going to come back every year and teach a class. And he's been very pro-Ukrainian, working very hard, like, in that part of the political world in the U.S., very hard. And it's because he has there are reasons for this. Like, he's an anti-fascist, and he believes that Russia is fascist, and, hallelujah. He's right. But not enough people think that on the far left. And, like, he, like, actually came to Ukraine. And you got to remember, like, for all these Westerners who come to Ukraine, they're all, I realize their situation is totally different from that of Ukrainians in Ukraine, but they're all breaking rules when they do it. Right? Like, I'm not supposed to go to Ukraine. Like, there are many reasons why. Like, their university is forbidding them from doing it, because we're a very big cowardly culture in general. So they, like, if they do it, they are actually working against some kind of pressure. So, like, give them a hand, make it easy for them, try to bring them, because that's the thing, as Slava says, which makes the difference. Okay, Slava, I'm going to sneak in and ask you a question, which is, I want to ask you. No, come on.
I had such an important question, but okay, go ahead, and then I'll keep. Oh, you give me one more.
All right, go ahead.
Because that's logical continuation of what we're talking about. English language in Ukrainian soft power.
Yeah.
So I know it's not a straightforward thing, because, like, one can say, okay, it's obvious the Ukrainian musicians should write and do something in English to become famous in the world, and thus to come back to Ukraine with this kind of investment of soft power. The Ukrainian movie stars start casting in Hollywood movies or whatever. Ukrainian writers being translated more and more and becoming, like, common names for Americans in English. But it's only one language. So do you think, like, investing in English language promotion is a worthwhile, or just focusing more on Ukraine, or just investing in as many languages as possible? What do you think?
No, it's really
still English is still the language of rock and roll, unfortunately or fortunately.
Yeah, so there's a funny thing about being American. Like, we talk about America, and it's this big culture, and it has all this soft power. But have you ever thought about the fact that Americans don't even have their own language? We don't. We speak English, right? Like, you can throw off the imperial language, and then you can go back to another language.
Everyone agrees, except
we speak the imperial language. We speak the language of our former empire, and we will as long as we exist, right? Like, you can say African Americans have code switching, and, like, there are people who are bilingual and so on. But in general, Americans don't have their own language, and this is a way of answering your question. This English which is spoken, it's not really anyone's language. For one thing, we're not very good at it. I don't know if you've noticed, but eventually your English will get good enough. Well, you'll realize that Americans don't speak it very well. Some of you may already be there.
Comparing to Oxford professors?
Some of you may already be there. But it's actually a good thing about us that we're not snobbish about the language. We're pretty tolerant about how people speak English. My point is that this English language is inherently already international. It's not really ours. We don't have a language. It's strange but true. And this English, which is spoken in Europe, the common language that I hear, like spoken on the train to Davos, right? That's not really anybody's language either. European English is not anybody's language either. So it turns like if English doesn't belong to the Europeans and it doesn't belong to us, it's sort of out there for the taking. And my answer to your question, Slava, is I think basically you have to appropriate English, right? You have to make it your own. You have to, of course, Ukrainians are going to do different things with English because Ukrainians are very creative, right? And Ukrainians will take any language and make a surjik out of it. Right?
We have so many. We have so many surjiks in English already.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
India, Nigeria, many other.
But when I listen to Ukrainian pop music now, like in Ukrainian pop music, there's all this English surjik now, right? So you have to take English. So I'm answering your question. You have to take English. You have to make it your own. You have to make it your own because it is the world language. It is a language you can reach out to people in. It's a language you can create culture in, right? There's a lot of Ukrainian music already, which is partly like where the chorus is in English or whatever. That will reach people. That will reach people in other ways, but it's a matter of making it your own. And by the way, this is also something which is changing. Drastically different. 10 years ago, part of the problem for Ukraine was that the Russians spoke English better than you did. And that's not true anymore, right? They're worse and worse at it, and you're better and better at it. And I think you're just kind of reaching that point where you can make it your own. And I think that's very important, right? Like the English is not anybody's language, so it's kind of everybody's language. And so you just have to appropriate it. You have to take it and do what you want to do with it.
Thank you. I don't want to disagree, okay?
Okay, all right. So my question, Slava, was I wanted to ask you, in your personal experience and as you look out at the Ukrainian cultural scene, what are some positive examples of, in the last few years, the last decade, from your point of view, of Ukrainian culture reaching out to the world and becoming soft power?
It's a good question, and thankfully I already mentioned that sometimes it takes time. So maybe there is a lot of things we can talk about which is still not on the, let's say, on the top of their possibilities, of their capacity, but they're already in motion. And first of all, Ukraine was always, even before the full-scale invasion, I think Ukraine was always great in using soft power in sports. And that's something we also need to mention it because, the most famous Ukrainians before we got the wartime President Zelensky, the most popular names were sport names, like football players and like boxers, like Klitschko's, yes, and it's still there. I remember we had a dinner in London with Andriy Shevchenko, a football player, and Sasha Zinchenko. So it was funny that when you go, it depends where you are. So when you go out from Albert Hall concert, the people were mostly asking me to make photos. When you go to a restaurant, people were reaching to Sasha Zinchenko, even more than to Andriy Shevchenko, because he's actual star now, and people know him, and they wanted to have a photo with him, which is a great thing. That's something that Ukrainian sports people, not all of them, unfortunately not all of them, but some of them were using very smartly and very patriotically, and I need to emphasize that and to praise them for that, because starting from these early 2000s until now, the consistency of that is unbelievable. Look at tennis players, look at Elina Svitolina, what she's doing, It's all, they are all playing for Ukraine, if I may say that, in sports and in life. So that's a very important thing, and we still keep doing that. A lot of Ukrainian writers are becoming more and more known in the world, and I'm very, very proud of my friend, my personal friend Serhii Zhadan, that he's conquering more and more of Western audience, mostly, interestingly, in non-English speaking countries, I think that's coming. But Germany and all the German-speaking world, he's already a big star. So I think it's a great achievement. A lot of electronic music, which even the electronic names, which are still even probably not a common names for Ukrainians, are big stars in the world already. And they are quietly doing their job as well and bringing something. And certainly there are some interesting English language musical projects that are still, let's say, under construction or under, I don't know how to say that properly. They're still being made, being baked. I think that in the nearest year or two they will become big, and I know that. And I'm crossing my fingers, and I'm talking about different names. So, I'm very positive about Ukrainian culture. Maybe something that I will say now will sound a little bit, controversial. Or I don't want it to sound controversial, but once again, the irony. I use this word irony because there is so much irony about everything that's going on now about Ukraine. But the irony is that regardless of what's happening on the battlefield, now I think Ukrainian word will be conquering the path for itself, for Ukraine more and more and more. My dream, and I will do my best, I will do whatever I can and cannot, that will coincide with our victories on the battlefield, because that's the most important thing now. But this Pandora box of Ukrainian culture, I believe, has been already opened, and nobody will close it regardless of the military success. And that's something that encourages me a lot, because that certainly will encourage soldiers on the battlefield as well. They will encourage all the people in Ukraine, knowing that now we are a different nation, that people know about us more, they respect us, they support us, even though sometimes politically their governments, their calculus are more cynical and they support only those who win on battlefield or not. They see if you win on battlefield or not. But music, movies, books, everything like that, dances, it will last forever. For a long time, definitely. And that's something that encourages me. And I think we've already started the process that, in my opinion, you may argue with me, but I think it's irreversible already. This is something contrary to the military thing, where it's very, very difficult, and I even don't want to discuss that. And I believe that we do our best to win, but I don't know. I know only things that the culture will win always, and Ukrainian culture is on the rise now. That's what I believe.
Okay, so I'm of the same opinion, but I think before we wrap up this conversation, you should actually act out some of the things that you're saying.
Is it a hint?
I'm sure. Yeah, I'm sure that within 100 meters of here somewhere, there's a guitar. There always is, in my experience, a guitar somewhere not very far away. And if I just keep talking long enough, it will eventually appear. Let's see. Oh, look.
Do you join me in singing?
A guitar.
Do you want to join me? Okay. Right, with my pleasure. And then the war occurred, and I immediately started going to see the troops, and I realized that it's very difficult for me to go there because I can't bring piano there. Some people think that going to see the troops on the front line, it's like a small private gig with loudspeakers, with PAs, with everything. It's not. It's actually sometimes it's happening in so appropriate places and so unimaginable, difficult places. So the only thing you have, it's yourself. And suddenly guitar is very helpful there. So I learned a little bit. As you learn Ukrainian, to understand Ukraine more, I learned playing guitar to play for our soldiers, and I'm happy that I can do that now. Still not the level that I'm proud to play on the big concerts, but it helps me in situations like this. So that's soft power of instruments. Okay, so talking about Ukrainian folk music. Ukrainian folk music already made a huge impact, and I'm so happy and proud that more and more foreign friends send me videos of Carol of the Bells saying, "Did you know that was a Ukrainian song?" Oh, surprise, surprise. And they were really, and I mean, "Did you know?" I say, "Of course I did. And I'm happy you know that now." And it's not only that, many Ukrainian songs are, kind of embodied in the Western culture as well. And there is I don't know if it's a rumor, but it certainly has something when you hear something, the similarities between famous Ukrainian lullaby, Ходить сон коли вікон, and Summertime, which is also a lullaby, and has immediately, from the first moment you hear it, okay, I've heard it somewhere, and there is a legend. I mean, I think it's just a made-up story, but maybe that's true, that George Gershwin, whose parents were from Ukraine, happened to be from Ukraine, was on the concert of him or Ira, his brother, were in the concert of the Ukrainian choir of Alexander Koshitz, where they actually presented Carol of the Bells as Shadrach first time. So, and they were impressed with these melodies, and some say that was the inspiration of Summertime. I don't know. It sounds very Ukrainian for me, by the way, but I don't claim it. What I claim is the Ukrainian folk music and traditional songs are the best in the world. Ой, чий там кінь стоїть, що сива гривонька сподобалась мені, тая дівчинонька, сподобалась мені, тая дівчинонька. Не так та дівчина, як біле личенько, подай же милая, подай же ясная, на коня рученьку, подай же милая, подай же ясная, на коня рученьку. Дівчина підійшла, рученьку подала. Ой, лучше б я була, ой, лучше б я була, кохання не знала. Ой, лучше б я була, ой, лучше б я була, кохання не знала. Кохання, кохання, з вечора до рання, як сонечко зійде, як сонечко зійде, кохання відійде, як сонечко зійде, як сонечко зійде, кохання відійде. Нехай ніколи не відійде наше з вами кохання до України. Okay, so I know it was supposed to be one song, but I knew that it wouldn't be one song. Okay, so let's pretend it's not a one song from the very beginning. Okay, so on another serious matter, I know that even today here in Davos, in Ukrainian house, we discussed all difficulties and all bad impact that the war made and continues to make on Ukraine, and certainly a very important and very sad and heartbreaking issue that we talk about are Ukrainian prisoners of war. And as we sit here in a very comfortable, even like family style room conversation with these great people, at this very moment, thousands of Ukrainian brothers and sisters in Russian captivity are struggling and challenging their whole lives in very, very different situations. And I know that everybody understands that, and I know that you all remember, but it's probably too late just to remember. We need to act and we need to do something. So I urge all of you, because I know there are many influential people from Ukraine and abroad, to raise your voice and also to act, whatever you can do, to press your governments, to raise this topic as possible as it is, because we need to get these brothers and sisters back home. They were defending not only Ukrainian future, they were defending and are defending the future of the whole free world, which is where we now are. So this song was written for and about the heroes of Mariupol, who were defending the Azov style and who are now well-known heroes. But many of them are still in Russian captivity, so I dedicate this song to them. Сонце зійшло над Азовом, вітер над дюнами дме, холод, але пісок пахне весною. Очі вже звиклі до втоми, надто багато причин. Мрію, як нам буде знов добре з тобою. І корабельні армати не розіб'ють мою мрію, віру ніколи не зрадить серце моє. Буде до віку стояти праведне місто Марії, доки над гордим Азовом сонце встає. Небо гримить над Азовом, ворог гарматами б'є, з вечора навіть бетон пахне війною. Думати, як буде завтра, часу немає і причин. Серце і руки давно звиклі до бою. І корабельні армати не розіб'ють мою мрію, віру ніколи не зрадить серце моє. Буде до віку стояти праведне місто Марії, доки залишились собою, ми загорнулись у ніч, і вільні уста стисли від болю, але й найглибші підвали світло повернеться знов, крик нового дня рветься на волю. І корабелі армати не розіб'ють мою мрію, віру, ніколи не зрадить серце моє. Буде до віку стояти праведне місто, місто Маріїнок. Над гордим Азовом сонце встає, доки над вільним Азовом сонце встає, доки над нашим Азовом сонце встає. Thank you. Дякую. Okay, and let's wrap it up on something universal. The song I'm gonna sing now, sorry for being a little bit immodest, but it's already working a little bit as a soft power, even without me translating it into English, because it's a Ukrainian song, but I've heard this song played for so many musicians all over the world in different languages, including certainly English, but also, you know, last time I've seen this song, it was a video from Israel. Israeli soldiers actually now are singing it in Hebrew, which means that music can do things, and it's very encouraging for me. Unfortunately, I don't have a capo, so to play it in a proper key, so it will be a little bit low for me, and I'm still learning how to play more sophisticated chords in different keys. So, pardon me for that, but this is the song all of you know, and I wanna have one more point. You mentioned that you can't make up things for soft power. This is the complete example of that. This song was written by me in 2012, and it's a song about relationship. And this song had nothing to do with war, with real war. It was about a figurative war, but after the war started, so many people started to associate it inside the country and outside, to associate this song with the war, and especially with the ending of the war, because that's how this song starts. When the day will come, the war is going to be over. So here is the song. Let it unite all of us, and let all of us cross our fingers, but also do something for our quickest victory. Коли настане день, закінчиться війна. I can't play it, it's out of tune. My musician in me says stop, I need to tune in. You need to impose soft power properly. that was improvisation, you know. So you can see that it was not made up. No sound check, no special instruments, no roadies, nothing. Just me sitting here and a guitar. Коли настане день, закінчиться війна, там дав би в себе, побачив аж до дна. Обійми мене, обійми, так лагідно і не пускай. Обійми мене, обійми, твоя весна прийде нехай. І от моя душа складає зброю вниз. Невже таки вона так хоче теплих сліз? Обійми мене, обійми, так лагідно і не пускай. Обійми мене, обійми, твоя весна прийде нехай. Обійми мене, обійми, і більше так не відпускай. Обійми мене, обійми, твоя весна прийде нехай. Thank you. Дякую вам. As they say in rock and roll, thank you for tonight.
Ladies and gentlemen, Slav Vakarchuk.
Дякую.